On this episode of Amor Al Migrante, we're joined by a special guest to unpack the challenges, victories, and the power of embracing different cultures.
And coming to the United States was also interesting. And, I realized I was Black when I was in Hong Kong.
As a child, you don't question your parents. You look up to them and you think they know
Everything.
everything.
Yes,
They're so smart and they're so wise and they're here to protect me. And so you just accept all of that as true. And then later you reach this point in your life where you're like, whoa, that was not okay.
We see immigrants as, like you said, like people who are poor, who are causing issues. But we forget that immigrants are also doctors, people who pay millions of dollars in taxes. Billions of dollars in taxes.
If you see me and immediately you're afraid and mistrusting and so forth,
Right.
that's okay. You don't know me. Our brain is wired that way.
Right.
But to go the extra mile to treat me badly,
That's
preemptive violence.
Welcome to another episode of Amor Al Migrante. Today, we would like to welcome a very special guest, Dr. Tawanda Chabikwa. Would like us to call you Tawanda?
Yes, please.
All right, perfect. We love that. You're assistant professor at UTEP in both the Department of Theater and Dance and African American Studies program. So your areas of study are super fascinating. We did some deep diving. We'll get to all of it. But we want to talk probably a lot about on your thoughts, culture, language, and I would say humanity, because that seems to be a really big component of a lot of the things that you work in, and all in the context of immigration, because this is our wheelhouse. Right? It's our wheelhouse.
And I am an immigrant.
Perfect.
We are.
We are.
Yes.
And another really important component that I think is really cool, that's really important to us, to Christian and I, is storytelling. So we'll touch on all of that.
On all of the aspects. So welcome to our podcast. And I want to start off by saying that I was listening to a podcast that you had, I think it was back in November. Back in March. And actually I was listening to it a few days ago, and I was talking to my wife about it. And I was like, you had this perspective that when we're immigrants, we're not looked at the same level as the people that are from the country that we're immigrating to. Yeah. And I just want to start out by saying that struck to me like, man, it's so true. That's why sometimes people see or can say if you are welcome or not, because they don't see us as equal. And at the end of the day, we're all humans.
Yeah.
And regardless of our skin color, nationality, region, like culture or anything, we're the same on the inside. And we cannot judge anyone by the way they look, they act, they talk, because we don't know their inside. So I just want to start off that conversation.
You just took a deep dive right in. You just went right into it, Christian.
Right? I was like, man, it made an impact on me. And I was like, man, it had me thinking like day, night, and even this morning I was like, man, so nice to have you in person. Because we saw you through a YouTube. So welcome to our podcast. Thank you. So, can you start? But I mean, we can start before I make a huge dive into the whole thing. But can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, what is it that you do? What is your background? You were telling us off the podcast that you were an immigrant. So can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Okay, absolutely. And may I call you Christian?
Chris. And Sandra.
Okay, great. I guess I'm Tawanda. About myself, I guess I'll talk about how I got here. I'm from Zimbabwe, born and raised, the capital city, Harare. And how did I get here?
Right.
So I grew up in, my family, mother, father, older brother, younger sister, and a younger brother who passed away as an infant. And growing up, my parents had a really strong work ethic and really encouraged studying as a big part of it.
Right.
So I was fortunate to be pushed in that direction as well. I was also always very playful and drawn to the arts and things of that sort. But after I went to a missionary boarding school, I was raised Catholic, nice. I got a scholarship to go to Hong Kong to finish up my high school, the International Baccalaureate there at the United World College. And things kind of opened up for me there because I was initially focused on sciences, maths, physics, biology, kind of funneled into it because my grades were okay.
Nice.
And
Nice.
when I got to Hong Kong, it was quite fascinating because in Zimbabwe, of course, the majority of people are Black Africans, even though when I went to elementary school, there are people of multiple races and
Right.
so forth. But when I was in Hong Kong, I started to understand the word minority. And then one thing I was grateful about with the United World College is the whole principle of the colleges. They have a few around the world and they offer lots of scholarships. The whole principle was kind of how do we prevent things like World War II happening, like the Cold War happening?
Right. Absolutely.
And the founders kind of figured out, hey, why don't we get people together while they're young?
Right.
You know, perhaps it's because when their minds are still flexible
Right.
Yeah.
for
Fresh
something of
and
that sort.
absorb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a small school. It was an international boarding school, and about 300 students from about 72 countries. About 30 or so percent were either from Hong Kong or mainland China, but basically every other person you met was from another country.
Wow, what an experience.
Right.
And it was a 2-year program. So typically you'd have one person a year ahead of you from your country.
Right.
So basically it was just
So,
two
all
from your
levels.
country.
Right.
But I saw amazing things happen there where students from say Holland or the Netherlands and Dutch speaking students would say to a South African African student, Black student, wait, why do you speak Dutch? And then so it goes. Or students from Serbia and Bosnia becoming friends, students from Palestine and Israel being friends.
That's amazing.
That's beautiful.
And we would figure it out as kids in this intense academic situation, but a beautiful social situation.
Absolutely.
Where we addressed and spoke about current affairs always and immediately. And it wasn't easy,
No.
but some of the most beautiful and ongoing friendships that I have in my life are with that community. And that really shaped a lot of my education. And before I got there, I was taught by the Marist brothers, the Catholic brothers.
Right.
And their whole thing is just educating young people. That's their mission.
The power in
I
that.
know, right?
Exactly. So I met some, wonderful brothers there who helped me trust myself and my curiosity about the world more, and that was great. So,
I bet.
yeah. But after Hong Kong, I got another scholarship to go to school in Maine, which is College of the Atlantic, an amazing small college as well. And they offered a single degree, which was human ecology.
Okay.
And human ecology is basically the philosophy of the interconnectedness of all human enterprise.
I'm like taking my notes.
So, yeah, so you start noticing we are all interconnected in things.
Absolutely.
I went to grad school in Dallas, focused on dance, because I was doing painting, creative writing, and dance at College of the Atlantic, and they allowed me to do that in amazing ways. My final project included a novel that I wrote, a dance performance, an art show. And then I had the choice to be like dance, visual art, or creative writing. And it occurred to me that, this thought that one choreographer from the Congo, Kinshasa, Faustin Linyakula says, he used this phrase like, my body is my country.
Cool.
Because I left my country when I was about, 15 and a half. I left home when I was about 11 to boarding school.
Right.
And I started through this process of what happens if I shed everything. If I shed my name, if I shed my religion, my nationality, my race, and so forth, who am I? That's a question that when I was 14 started bouncing.
Wow.
And I remember asking one of the brothers and so forth. They're just like, yeah, figure it out, kid.
You're on your own. We can't help you with that.
Yeah, but I've always been kind of, thinking in that way. And I kind of came to the conclusion at that time that if I take everything away, then I'm basically just my experiences and how I respond to them, right? And this is a situation where even if I let go of my past and everything, so really all I have is these encounters moment by moment. Yeah.
Enjoying this podcast? For almost 40 years, Estrella del Paso has supported over 500 clients from 80 different countries thanks to people like you. And your support keeps this work going. During these critical times, help us continue by donating at estrelladelpaso.org. And that's it. Back to the podcast.
And coming to the United States was also interesting. And, I realized I was Black when I was in Hong Kong. Finally. And don't get me wrong,
Right.
post-colonial Zimbabwe also has its very clear complexities. But there were some encounters in Hong Kong that were amazing and negative. That's where you realize everywhere there are people who are okay with difference and curious, and people who are fearful.
Right.
One of the experiences in Hong Kong that was intriguing, it would get packed at rush hour, buses, people standing, right up against each other and so forth. And they have those double-decker buses with 2 stories. Mm-hmm. And I always like to sit in the front if I ever got a chance so I could see things.
Oh, nice.
And this bus was packed. And there are 2 seats here, 2 seats, I think, on the other side. And people were standing lined up and no one sat next to me.
Oh.
It was packed. The bus was packed.
Somebody
I
wanted
cannot-
that seat.
Indeed. Nobody sat next to me. And I'd had other encounters of, this fear of my Blackness and so forth. I became familiar with anti-Blackness as a phenomenon quite young. And in that moment, I felt a lot of things. Are these people afraid of me? Are they disgusted by me? And all of these things that were being projected onto my physical body at that time.
That's crazy.
And then it occurred to me that, yes, at times when I travel around the world, because of stereotypes, people have these gut reactions about things they don't know.
Right.
Being African, Africans are accused of, being poor, poverty-stricken, all the images you see, diseases and so forth, prone to theft, hypersexual, not trustworthy, lazy, etc., etc.
It's just...
And then you realize, wow, that's how they're experiencing my body and my physical presence in this space right now. And I thought I could choose either to be hurt and spend the entire ride believing what they think about me, or I could put my feet up. So I put my feet up. I leaned up and I enjoyed the ride.
I'm going to take up this
Nice.
space. That's amazing.
Man,
The
that's so
space
powerful.
was there and it was offered. And I was like, that's the choice.
That's powerful. At
Because,
such a young age.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely
powerful.
I was probably younger and dumber than but in that moment, a lot kind of happened. And this will lead to the thing where I like to start all the classes I teach at UTEP and elsewhere by stating one thing. I usually take a deep breath and tell them rule number 1. And I remind them that all my rules are rule number 1. But this is rule number 1.
Number one of number one.
Exactly. I tell them you belong.
Oh, wow. What are the odds?
Yeah.
Because in most spaces I've been the foreigner. I've been one of the few Black people. I've been a minority, quote unquote. So I say you belong. I pause and I repeat, you belong. I do not care about your race, your ethnicity, your religion, your gender, your sexuality, your height, your socioeconomic class. Just by virtue of being born into this universe, you're a spark of the divine existence. Therefore, you belong.
Oh.
In this class, I would like you to know that you belong. Outside of this class, I'd like you to know that you belong. And don't let the world tell you anything different.
Otherwise.
So that's how I like to begin the teaching, because there are so many spaces in which I didn't feel I belonged.
That you belonged.
Indeed.
I think that's extremely relatable. I
Absolutely.
think that for some of those people in your classes, I can imagine that that's probably the first time they've ever heard anyone say something like that to them out loud. As you were telling the story on the bus and you're talking about these stereotypes and these ideas that people were projecting onto you, I liked the use of that word because I could visually see it like daggers physically
Yes.
being is the way that I
Basically.
see that in my head, because that's how it feels, right? When people make these certain judgments or view you a certain way and internally you're thinking, you don't even know me. You don't know what I'm about. But it
exactly.
feels like you're being attacked from all these ends from strangers.
And I think you mentioned something important too, is that their fear is that the one that creates those stereotypes, because when you are afraid of something, you see it wrong. You don't see it like normal to you.
Right.
And you going through that experience of being to school with so many nationalities, so many different people, remove any fears that you could have had from other nationalities.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important for everyone to at least experience a space and environment that it's different from what you see every day.
Yeah.
Because that's gonna go ahead and put you out of your comfort zone, one, and then two, is gonna put you in a position where you're like, man, if I'm afraid of these people, I'm not gonna have any friends. I'm not gonna have anyone to talk to.
Yeah.
So I need to remove this, I guess like scariness that I have, and put myself in there and start talking to them. And like you said, like it's like an onion, right? You peel the layers.
Yeah.
And once you see what it's inside, it's exactly different, or like what you were having in your mind.
You walk towards it. You know?
Exactly.
You walk towards the unknown. You know, you don't run and hide. Stay curious.
Yeah.
You know, because somebody said something on this panel I was just on. And I will say this terribly because my Spanish is terrible, but it was like something like cada persona es tu mundo or mundo.
Cada persona es un mundo.
Yes. Cada
Yes.
persona es un mundo.
I get the Spanish part.
I only speak bad Spanish, bad Portuguese, so I get it wrong.
No.
But every person is a world.
Yeah.
And there's this thing, even when I work with students, I talk about this idea of, are you willing to look somebody in the eye and say hello? I have an entire exercise. We do it almost for a week at the beginning. Walk up and say, hello, my name is, and look somebody in the eye.
Right.
Something so simple can seem like the most terrifying experience, though.
Yeah.
And we talk about the experience, that fear of just like, hey, I told you you belong, now behave like it. And know that everyone else here belongs. Say hello.
Yeah.
And we go around and we say our names, and I say, and I remind them, say your name like you belong. Don't mumble it. Don't hide it. Your name is your mark of belonging. It's the legacy that you choose.
Yeah.
So that when your name is spoken, people know what they're talking about, the world that is you.
Yes.
Wow.
So
So
that's powerful.
that belonging is really a big thing.
It's
I
important.
think,
And it's a concept that has to be put more out there, and especially in these times where like there's so much like division and like differences between economic classes, different cultures and stuff, and people forget that we all belong. Like you mentioned right now, like we are creators of the universe. And it's one universe for all of us. It's not like we can just fly away to another planet.
I don't like it here.
Yeah, let me get to the universe number 4 because that's where it's everyone who likes me, right?
Yeah.
And man, that's something that we need to drill into people's head, that you belong, and regardless if you are in here or like Rwanda or any other place, you still belong because you're a human being,
Right.
And that's what matters in this sense.
I think that your story is really relatable. And the reason I feel like is once you get to know someone, that's why that exercise is so important. Because if you just telling us that experience on the bus, that's such a relatable story. Because I don't have a bus story, but I have a story. You know what I mean? Like I think we all have that story when somebody treated us in this certain way that you're like, and I think it sticks with you the first time that you become really conscious of, that's what's happening.
Yes.
That's why you're treating me this way. I think that we can all relate to that experience in different scenarios.
And I have this memory when I was with family members that I have in Denver, and it was like around 7 or 8 years old, right? And we went to a restaurant. We were eating. We were gonna order to eat something, and you have the waiter come to the table and then brings the food, and she's like, "This is for Juan." And she never asked for my name. And it stuck to me, right? And like years later, it was like...
That would keep me up at night, like enraged, right?
But at that time, I wasn't exposed to like being discriminated, right?
Right.
So I was like, wow, I ate my food like nothing.
Yeah.
And then years later, like later, I was like, man, that's what she meant. Oh my gosh.
Isn't that amazing? I love that you bring that up because over time, there are experiences that keep coming up from the past.
Right.
oh crap, that was racism.
Yes.
Oh, good.
You
What?
did research?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm like,
Exactly
I'm
how it
glad
feels.
I didn't know it back then. When I was in Hong Kong, I had a wonderful art teacher, two of them actually, Chris Hill and Annie Hill. They were from New Zealand. And Annie in particular was indigenous, part indigenous New Zealander. And the first book she gave me, because occasionally I'll go to her and be like, what's going on? Why can't I seem to like get forward in this world? And she gave me this book by Richard Wright, I believe, called The Invisible Man. And it's an African American writer, and he really delves deeply into, race in America. And I'd never been to America, but that like kind of like sparked something. This idea of, oh wait, they don't see me. They don't see me. I'm standing right here and they don't see me. They see something that doesn't belong, something that'll steal from them, something that, oh crap, I'm invisible. Because I would go to her and I was almost sobbing. I was like, I didn't do anything. I'm like, exactly, Tawanda, you didn't do anything. So you're just a blank canvas and they will paint whatever they want. So be okay with taking up space. Tell people who you are and be who you are more. And it's okay, because sometimes your knowing that you belong will actually upset people.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It's the best revenge, right? It's the best comeback, right?
Indeed. It's the same, with sexism, men being intimidated when women speak up or speak directly, as men do, right? It's like, who is she to think?
Who does she think she is?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's interesting. And you touched on this a little bit, but this idea of Black and Blackness, and something that you discovered at different phases throughout your life. But I think what's really interesting is the idea that you make sure to point out that when it comes to Black and Blackness, you're trying to encompass this huge culture, different cultures, languages, religions, traditions, and it's like let's simplify it, as you say, as we do, as we do as a nation. We want a simple little box that we can put things in, right?
Where it is.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that experience for you.
One of the things I enjoy researching and creative research and scholarly research is around the idea of personhood, right? Because in all my experiences, it started, coming up to me. It's like, wait, what do people think a person is?
Right.
And then I started realizing, the dominant cultures may have a very different idea of what a person is, right? If we think of the dominant culture as, capitalist, industrialist, technocratic, technology-ridden, linear, and things of that sort, the idea of a person doesn't really sit well with what other cultures believe a person is. And I'm from Zimbabwe. So in the Chivanu culture, and Vanu is from Munu, which means person. So, and a number of other African cultures, the term Ubuntu is thrown around quite a lot, but that's, specifically from Southern Africa, but what a person is. And understanding that a person is a person, not in isolation because they're a thing, but personhood is actually established through relationship.
Correct.
Right? Because I can only be a person among other people.
Yeah, exactly.
And therefore I'm a person because of other people.
Right.
So the greatest ideal is to have positive relationship. And the thing about relationship means you have to move towards difference. You have to embrace conflict, right?
Okay.
So you don't think in binary terms, right?
Or right and
dualistic
wrong,
terms.
right?
Yeah. The aim is one African-American psychologist, one of the founders or forefathers of Black psychology, describes it as diunital psychology or diunital logic. When something is different, you move toward it in order to create unification and positive relationship.
Interesting.
And one of my mentors from the Ohio State University, Dr. Linda James Myers, was very influential in actually helping me discover these ideas and these voices. She has a wonderful book called Understanding the Afrocentric Worldview. And she lays this all out in a theory called optimal psychology. And she puts it a lot like bumping right up against, Western cultures, Euro-American culture and so forth. This idea of difference being something that should be feared. This idea of putting things in hierarchies.
Right.
Right. And then having categories and treating people as categories and ideas and so forth. So that is very different than, can I actually accept the whole person for what they are? Am I willing to be in relationship? Right. So there's this preemptive fear thing, right? I talk about in one of the podcasts where if you see me and immediately you're afraid and mistrusting and so forth.
Right.
That's okay. You don't know me. Our brain is wired that way.
Right.
But to go the extra mile, to treat me badly, that's preemptive violence.
Right.
Yes. I'm not going to give
violence.
You a job.
That adds the serious nature that it embodies.
It is violence. I see, I'm not going to give you a job. I don't know you, but I won't give you a job. That's an action.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. That's an action based off of not knowing, I'm going to treat you as less than. I see you, therefore you're trying to steal something from me. Oh. Where does that come from? You're taking my this, you're taking my... Dude, I just showed up. I'm just here minding my business. Right. I laugh sometimes and I think of, National Geographic Shark Week. And I think sometimes, imagine as an immigrant, sometimes it's like being a shark. You're minding your business, swimming in the water, and somebody shows up with a camera. The most dangerous thing. Like, dude, I'm just swimming here.
Great
doing what sharks do. I'm going to eat this. It's like, wow.
Yeah. I'm just in my space.
And then they zoom in, So that action, pushing negative action forward where, there's a positive empty space between us. We choose what to put into it. And being an immigrant is complex, is really complex.
Enter the immigrant conversation because the parallels when you talk about the fears, right, of just existing, right, and we have immigrants from so many different nations who are showing up at our borders in different ways, and this idea that you can call them an immigrant and that's it. Now you're able to completely dehumanize them, almost discard them, right? Because you have this idea of what an immigrant is, and you've placed them in these categories that are less than where you see yourself. And you're like, because of that, they're not worthy of anything. They're not worthy of shelter. They're not worthy of meals. They're not worthy of support, of any of this. And how we got there is...
And isn't it a huge leap of logic, right?
Right.
Because one thing I noticed when I was in Hong Kong, for instance, the difference between an immigrant and an expatriate.
First of all, it's the same thing. One is privileged and the other is not.
Raise my eyebrows, right? So we know what an immigrant is, right? An immigrant isn't a person from Holland or Scandinavia. An immigrant is probably darker. Indeed, we start there, and then they're probably poor. And we're already projecting, right? Because the word immigrant shows up.
Right.
The idea of immigrant or the term immigrant itself is a really loaded term, right?
Yes.
And when we think about it, it paints a very clear picture. Right. I like to suggest, all these ideas that are projected on the term immediately. We've had national leaders describe people coming over the borders as murderers and rapists, thieves, here to steal this and that. Using animal-like terminology, they are breeding like rats, or they are like cockroaches. So all of these associations are loaded onto this term.
Right.
So that completely negates the value.
Right.
Of a person.
Right.
But more than just negating their value, it takes away things from them. And then we actively take away possibilities, employment, jobs, shelter, as you mentioned, food, and so forth. Because with that idea is a moral judgment of somebody. The term immigrant is not just a word or a descriptor. It is a moral judgment of somebody. And that judgment is, you are in this situation because it's your fault.
Right.
It's your fault. If you had worked harder, if you had read more books, if you had passed your exams, if you didn't have that baby, if you had another baby,
Right.
Yes.
right, or if you're a grandfather. So it comes immediately with blame. And the world has this terrible, unspoken habit of moral judgments against the poor and the disadvantaged.
Yes.
Deep down inside, something says it's your fault.
As if it weren't systemic
Right.
There
in
we
nature.
go.
Come
There
on.
we go, right? And that's where, the borders come in.
Right.
I like to remind, my students that the nations, the world as we know them now, are a very young thing, a couple of 100 years, right? And before that, there were other borders and so forth. And, being from Africa, carved up into 52 parts, or, those are not my borders, right? I know the land I'm from. I know my ancestors, my ancestry. Should I really even believe in these borders? They make them real.
Right.
But those borders are built on relationships that are not the relationships we had
Right.
before.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Those borders are built on economic relationships
Right.
that served a specific population.
Right.
So as we do this and we look at migrants, right, as people with blame and so forth, we're denying the fact that, we, i.e., a very specific history of imperialism that's also based on raciological things and patriarchal things that are gendered.
Right.
That we is what created this. And nobody will turn around and consider this fact that, yes, we created those borders. We left. We created economic and political instability intentionally.
Right.
We know
Yes.
organizations that have done
Right.
this. We planted leaders, took them out, and so forth. We started a war on XYZ, and now it's coming back to Malcolm X, I believe it was. I'll have to double check this. But I believe when he really upset the nation at one point when President Kennedy was shot. And he was asked, what do you think about it? So he said, well, it's the chickens coming home to roost. People did not like that.
I imagine. I
Did
would
not like
imagine.
that. But this idea of part of the fear and disgust and dislike of immigrants, I think it makes us confront who we are.
Yeah.
We don't
Our
like looking in that
actual
mirror.
histories.
We don't like looking in that
Exactly.
mirror of the damage and
love
what we
that you
do in
say that.
other countries.
I love this, right? Because personhood is relationship. I can only be in relationship to you, which means when I look at you,
You're equal.
you're me. You're the other me.
Yeah.
As some languages say, you are another me.
Right.
You dig? And that is quite a mirror to look into.
Yeah.
And we want to keep those stories away, but not too far away, just enough so we can blame them for our problems.
Yes. And when we need him, we can bring him back.
There we go.
Yeah.
Why is the economy bad? It's the immigrants. Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
Sure. Yes, indeed.
But we'll find out later on when the economy is bad because we don't have people from
many
other
immigrants,
countries coming
right?
in.
There we go.
And,
There we go.
and I think you mentioned in one of the podcasts something really, really that struck to me. One more thing, right? It was the fact that we see immigrants as, like you said, like people who are poor, who are causing issues. But we forget that immigrants are also doctors, people who pay millions of dollars in taxes. Billions of dollars in
Yes.
taxes. So
Yes.
I guess we
Yes.
came to the point that we forget and we only see what we want to see, and we're
Right.
walking, and we could have powerful,
Precisely.
really amazing immigrants on this side, and we're just walking like this towards what's happening in the border.
And that's part of the narrative, right?
yeah.
That comes up. Oh gosh, you know how ads pop up and they're, when you're on social media and the algorithm. But I saw this one ad where somebody was just like, did you know that the U.S. government is giving $5,000 to every immigrant who comes across our border, illegal immigrants included? And it was just like this. What?
What?
Where? Why? And then you see, so when economically successful, intelligent immigrants are in positions of power that they have earned,
Yes.
that narrative is now shifted. See, they are taking our jobs. They are taking
Right.
so all of the poorer immigrants, economically speaking, who are coming in, are being accused of having that. It's the oh gosh, it's so hard,
Right.
when it's such this entangled web of delusional thinking. I like what you said earlier on, Christian. This idea of when somebody's afraid of you, they don't see you.
Right.
So their perception is actually skewed. In my case, I realized after a while that people are confusing my blackness for the darkness within themselves.
Oh,
And that was like, oh,
that's good.
what
It's
are
a
people
you
actually
problem, not a
seeing?
me
Yes,
problem.
yes.
Right? There's this idea called perceptual inertia, right? Like inertia, momentum of a thing. And the world right now exists in a place where this colonial momentum of perception is really sticking
Yeah.
because race had to be created. Blackness had to be created. Otherness had to be created. Marginality had to be created.
Right.
And images had to be made. Propaganda had to be used, etc., etc.
Yeah.
To be like, these are the bad people. These are the bad people. These are, and it continues and it continues. And a lot of people don't pause to question that.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Where did these ideas come
Right.
from?
and I think that's the hard work because we have to look at ourselves. No culture is free of bias, implicit bias.
Right.
Right. And if I can confront that in myself, in my own upbringing, it becomes much easier to be like, oh yeah, that's not right.
Right.
I remember learning the phrase again, poor Spanish, avanza la raza.
Oh,
Yes.
Yes, indeed. And how many of my friends that, were honest enough to say, yeah, I casually heard that growing up, in family
Without
context and so
understanding,
forth, that
yeah.
understanding. And to own up, and that doesn't mean your family was bad. Can you understand that that's an idea that you don't have to continue carrying
Right.
forward?
Right.
Right? When people say those people are the bad people and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Because even within communities, there's a class thing, right? A colorism thing, a
Right.
race thing. It's hard to really cut down to that root because it takes a lot of honesty and faith, trust that it's going to be okay
Yeah.
when the truth is clear,
Right.
and we live accordingly.
It does require a lot of unlearning and being really intentional about these things that you've just accepted your entire life. Because if you think about these things that happen in your household, as a child, you don't question your parents. You look up to them and you think they know everything.
Yes,
They're so smart and they're so wise and they're here to protect me. And so you just accept all of that as true. And then later you reach this point in your life where you're like, whoa, that was not okay.
Yes.
But I do, with that said, I do want to say that there's something to be said about our parents and even our grandparents doing the best they could with what they had and what they were taught, right?
Exactly.
And how much did they question? Were they being able to question it is a privilege, right?
Exactly. And that's the idea, right? It doesn't mean they are bad.
Right.
It's just a flawed idea. And we are brilliant because we're human. We can change our minds about things. And when we can understand, oh, those are the situations and circumstances they grew up in, they had evidence and experiences to support that.
Right. Exactly.
And at this moment, right, we can ask, is that really true? This idea I'm believing, is this evidence really the truth?
Right.
Because you went through other experiences.
So there we go. So it's like letting go of judgment, right? So it's this non-dualistic thinking. Can we actually just spend time with ideas and experiences and just take a deep breath and be like, oh, this is a little messed up.
Right? Let me change that a little bit.
Or
Yes.
this is a cool thing. We could probably stick with this one and so forth. But I think there's a big myth of scarcity
Yeah.
in the world.
Absolutely.
When it becomes about resources.
Yes.
All right. When human ecology once again might propose that, we actually have enough for everybody.
For everyone.
Yeah.
We just have to share our toys.
It's okay.
Because when you realize things like poverty and hunger are actually engineered, right? Certain communities are, even the history of El Paso say, redlining and things of that sort. Certain communities are kept in poverty.
Right.
So they can keep providing labor in certain ways, right? Certain people are kept in situations of scarcity. The politics of, food around the world and things like that. Farmers being paid to grow less every once in a while so we can keep the prices correct.
Right.
And all of this myth of scarcity when we can actually live in a sense of, I believe, abundance. Abundance, not to dip too much into the spiritual side of things, but there is abundance in creativity, right?
Yeah,
Creation itself is abundant, and as humans, we have that capacity to be creative and abundant. But I think we live in a world where it's very mine. I have to protect mine. And
that's exactly what happens to the U.S. is that people who are against immigration, they like the top three things that they say is like, it's my taxes. They're leaving off the money on my taxes. We all pay taxes. They pay taxes. And they feel like if you go to Walmart, it's going to be you and an immigrant, and the immigrant is going to grab everything from you. And it's not going to happen.
Right.
No, they can't restock.
And they're not going to restock because they want you to pay $32 for eggs. If there's only 2 left, then they can justify it, right?
It's our fault.
Right.
Oh my God. It's like, there are no more eggs. Wait, what happened to the chickens? Are they gone?
Let them go. Right. Yeah. But I think that people has this mentality that they are gonna take what's mine.
Yeah. Right.
They
and there's not enough.
Not enough to go around.
Exactly.
Not enough.
There is.
And they provide, they give, they help us. Everyone as a community comes together to make more.
Right.
So, and yeah.
I know a funny story about like property is a big thing in the United States.
Yeah.
People used to be property. Weird. But I remember I was at one point in Ohio, relatively rural part and stuff, hanging out with some friends, new friends and things. And I always love having these conversations with people, no matter where they stand in beliefs, be they political or religious. I love it. But we're talking about blackouts and power cuts, right? And in Zimbabwe, they are a thing that happens, indeed, right? Power cuts happen. What happens when there's a power cut? Light a candle or something, make a fire, keep going about your day, see if your phone's still charged and stuff like that. And I asked this person because they were talking about, government things. And I said, okay, how about we let go of everything? And if right now, let's say there was a power cut and you knew that there would be no power for 1 month, what would be the first thing you do? And he said, well, the first thing I'd do is take my gun and stand on my porch and protect my... I was like, wait, who's coming to get you? You got enemies I don't know about?
Probably people will be passing by like nothing.
Are you
like,
charging your phone? Are you charging electronics, backup batteries, generators?
That particular individual's first go-to was grab my gun, protect my stuff. I'm like, who is coming to get you? Yeah. And there's a thing in the American narrative that I've also realized that's very similar.
Yeah.
This idea like folks are out to get you. Right? China's out to get us. Russia's out to get us. Japan's out. They want our things. I was like, wow. The overstory of this paranoia. And then, of course, that idea of like chickens coming home to roost is like, what have you done that makes you think somebody's going to want to get you?
Yeah, come after you.
No, we don't talk about those things.
No.
We don't talk about, the indigenous bodies that are buried under this land.
That part.
The enslaved peoples, the Chinese migrants that built the railways, the way we took things. Drew a new line on the border.
Yeah.
No, they're just out to get us. Why? Because they don't like us. Because we're successful. Cause they're what?
Yeah.
So there's a certain kind of deeply seated dishonesty. And when we can't be honest, the fear grows. Yeah.
There's a lesson in accountability that we teach kids, right, as they get older, become teenagers. And it's like, hey, consequences of your actions. Like, take some accountability. If you were wrong, you were wrong. And I think the U.S. missed that lesson.
And I think that's unfortunate because part of the joy of personhood and understanding yourself as part of like a beautiful functioning cosmos is you understand about renewal, rebirth, and forgiveness.
Right.
Yeah. It's okay.
It's okay.
So many indigenous cultures have all these processes for forgiveness and renewal of social relationships.
Do better going forward.
Rather than just burying it and pretending it didn't happen. And anyone who states it, it's weird now. It's like they're making our children feel bad about the truth.
Right.
We're talking about, no, we're not.
Since when the truth is bad,
Since nobody, we're just saying this happened.
Can we acknowledge it, please?
Why are you feeling bad about it? Is there something you want to talk about? It just happened. It just happened.
True.
Right?
So true. So true.
Considering all of your own immigrant experience, everything that you've experienced, how do you think that it's kind of a two-part question. How do you think that has impacted the way that you view what you see now on this border with the arrival of immigrants? Do you see that it kind of helped prepare or kind of shape what your perspective on that would be?
I think there are many moments in my life that have shaped my perspective. I'm grateful for my mother,
Yes.
and she was so many things: a nurse, a pharmacist, and a social worker. Still is.
Oh, wow.
And she also used to work in AIDS education, family planning things, and so forth. She is a powerhouse and a revolutionary in terms of service, So that was instilled in my mind very young. Whenever you're in a community, help.
Mm-hmm.
Just help.
Yes.
Indeed, you don't go to take things, but
Big
to
word.
help and to build relationships that are positive. And for my father, education, curiosity, clarity, arguing about, things if you disagree with, ideas, and really being full on about the truth and things as you see them. I remember he gave me a book on world religions as a kid. I was raised Catholic. And he was like, read this, bam. I know we're Catholic, but you got to know. And I read that book again. I was like, oh yeah, these are all the same. Cool. So when I hear religious words, I'm like, oh God. But this idea of difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that ethic of positive relationship was great. And then leaving the country and realizing at a higher level, oh gosh, people really don't like me because of these things, right?
Yeah.
Those experiences of being different in places, right? And I loved volunteering in elementary and high schools in Hong Kong and everywhere I go. And typically I've been, one of very few Black people that, kids have seen. And it's so cool to see the shift in the relationship, right? From the initial encounter and then moving towards each other and so forth. And it's just beautiful to see that people can change their minds, right?
Yes.
But these experiences of being different and experiencing the negative aspects and the positive aspects and so forth, I'm grateful that to some extent I've maintained my sanity and my trust in goodness.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, from the Afrocentric idea, and this is Dr. Linda James Myers again, the greatest ideal is sort of the deification of humankind. So the experience of being human is you finding your way closer and closer to your higher self, your divine self. And you have other humans whose purpose is to help you figure that out.
Yes.
Because they are your reflections and things like that. So how can I be a positive agent in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And hopefully with humility, accept, the ways in which I'm flawed, correct the things that I do incorrectly, and continue to strive towards that,
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard not to get discouraged.
Right.
Everyone is fighting their own battle in their own world sometimes.
Yeah.
But as I like to say to people, I just try to find the others wherever I can. And by the others, I mean resonances.
Right.
Yeah.
And they emerge, like this podcast. And I was like, oh, there's some others.
Let me go chat with them.
And in doing this, we kind of encourage each other to keep going, And
I agree.
You're not alone. You're not different,
You belong.
Indeed. I can't be fooled by what there's this dancer, Sabella Grimes, a hip-hop dance scholar, and I was taking his class, and he was like, all right, folks, I want you to treat your earth suit right. I was like, your earth suit? And he means your body. He's like, this is just your vessel, your earth suit. Right?
That's really cool.
And it's like, don't be confused by somebody's earth suit,
Yeah.
Who's the person? Who's the person? I've always liked that term. And this migration factor is really hard, immigration.
Yeah.
Because, this earth suit, this body, it can get hurt. It
Yeah.
can die. It carries stories. It keeps score, as one writer says, and it keeps score of everything, both the good and the bad.
Right.
And that changes us, from the inside. And we can keep resonating more and more with the good along the way.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
Good. I'm glad you brought up the movement, because this is this kind of to bring this conversation to end it on a positive note, a little bit more uplifting. The movement, the dance, and the bring that. Talk a little bit about your work doing that.
Yes. I love that. One of the reasons I got into dance, as there was the choice to be funneled into one box or another, that idea of, well, my body's my country. Everything comes from it, through it, with it. This is my ultimate technology for navigating this world. So I chose dance. And partly I was able to discover my own power, along with the I belong factor. And that I tell students, I always remind them, you are beautiful. You are beautiful, right? Yes. There are no standards for beauty. Your mere existence is beauty in itself.
Man.
And when I started doing, these embodied things, I always used to love sports. I'm a huge fan of so many martial arts and so forth. And in Hong Kong, one of my friends from Bermuda was setting up this choreography. He was like, I'm dancing with 6 girls. I've seen you do martial arts. It's easy. Come join us. And that's how I got into dance.
Nice.
I realized, wait, this is just like sports and martial arts, right? Because I got into martial arts because of the philosophy. I don't like fighting. The worst time in any martial arts is when the teacher's like, now we have to spar. I was like, I don't know. Why am I fighting? but there was just something about moving your body in certain ways. And then understanding so many indigenous cultures and have these technologies, ritual, ceremony, dance, sun dance, gathering together, the things we do with our bodies really shape our minds and our sense of it too.
Yeah.
So in this world, if we think of it as, capitalist industrialist, it's very assembly line. We treat our bodies as, vehicles to carry our brains from meeting to meeting. And then we, slowly you might realize when you're doing your Pelotons, it's like, why am I feeling so good? Endorphins after exercise. Right? I do yoga, I'm breathing. Oh, wow, oxygen and this type of movements helps energy and things flow better. Yeah. I'm running, I get in the zone, I'm in the flow. I feel like I'm flying. Yes. And I realize that we live our lives as if it's like eyes and brain is what's privileged. And that's how, media and algorithms take advantage. It's like triggering mind, brain. But if you can take time to just be in your body, amazing things happen. Yeah. And if you can trust in these, I do call them technologies. Yeah. There's a wonderful mentor of mine, Dr. S. Amare, over at University of Irvine. She has created and continues to build on this dance technique called embodiology. And it's an improvisation technique rooted in a Ghanaian culture, the Ewe peoples of the Volta region. And she has this thing where she's delving into these ideas around ritual, rhythm, repetition, etc. And one thing I tell students as well in dance, because I work a lot with rhythm, drawing from my own culture, is somebody will say, I don't have rhythm. And I say, what do you mean? You are rhythm, right? You wake up, you sleep. You wake up, you sleep. You walk, 1, 2. You walk, 1, 2. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Your heartbeat, do, da-da-do, da-da-do, da-da-do. You eat, you excrete. You eat, it's like the whole universe is rhythm. And your body is the most amazing rhythm there is. And if you can understand what different rhythms do to people, you can start controlling and changing things, right? Some people suffer from seasonal depression things. That rhythm is little circadian rhythms. How much light do I get? How little do I get? But once I really start to understand the body and movement as something I can do, that the body has its own intelligence, its own memory, and things of that sort. There's a whole field called epigenetics that talks about how, experiences of our ancestors change our DNA. Yeah. Right? So these experiences of violence against bodies on board, those things are going to sink into people's DNA. Holocausts have to, but we have the opportunity through positive relationship to the body, I like dance, right, to shift, these genetics, these generational traumas, to build our bodies so they can become more willing to reach out to others and so forth. Yeah. We don't have to buy into the old narratives. So my thing with dance, I treat it as 3 things. Dance for me is a mode of transformation, contemplation, and healing.
Wow.
And coincidentally, it might look good in a performance.
That's just an added plus.
It's a plus. Yeah. Nice.
But to me, it is a philosophical, spiritual, and moral practice. And we can use it to heal and to continue to grow more positively.
That's amazing.
Man.
I feel so inspired.
I want to dance.
I know.
You have to left it.
Who have rhythm, Christian?
Right. I know. I just learned that. Man, that's amazing. So I guess we came to the end of the podcast. I don't want to end it before saying thank you.
Absolutely.
Trust me, I've learned so much, and I hope people who listen to this podcast learn as well, because it's packed with so much information. And to remove those myths and fears that we have from others. And I encourage you to push yourself and create relationships with persons who you are not used to. Because that's the only way we're gonna go ahead and feel like we belong, like you mentioned. Simple exercise, like you said, going handshake, looking at the eyes, hi, my name is, and that's it. And I promise it's gonna make a difference. Sandra, anything you want to add before?
No, I just these are heavy topics, right? These are heavy subjects. They're not things that are easy to talk about. So I appreciate you making it sound so poetic. To be quite honest, I mean, I just felt like I could be here all day having this conversation. So I appreciate that. We're kind of creating the space and being willing to participate in that. In that conversation.
Tawanda, Christian, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm grateful and I'm humbled because, like you said, these are conversations that people aren't that willing to have. And people are so much more willing to listen to the negative conversations that don't build up. So I'm humbled and grateful for this. And also know that I'm a product of the people who came before me, my teachers, mentors, friends, family, ancestors. And I'm grateful to them too, and grateful to be on this land that was taken, that I am honored to be a part of. I'm grateful to
same on this side.
Just being a part of humanity.
Exactly. Doing our part, right?
We all are part of humanity. And we have these, what is it that you call earth suit?
Earth suit that we're wearing.
So I guess that will conclude our podcast, guys. Don't forget to tune in for the next episode, and thank you guys. Have a nice one.
This is the Amor Al Migrante podcast, Love for the Migrant, a project of Estrella del Paso, the largest provider of free immigration legal services in West Texas and southern New Mexico. This podcast is coming to you from El Paso, Texas, hosted by Sandra Ramirez and Cristian Trujillo. Please subscribe to the Amor Al Migrante podcast to be alerted about new episodes, and visit www.estrelladelpaso.org to support our work on the southern border.